There's no way he just said this. As in a very surprising turn of events, Mark Shapiro came out and addressed to the media today, and everybody thought, lots of Jays fans thought that he was going to be calling out Ross Atkins, that he was going to be making some major moves. But what he actually had to say might just shock you. So to break down those comments, discuss what it could mean not only for the Jays this season, but going forward, as he also hinted at their offseason plans and potentially some things regarding Vladdy and Bo as well. So to break all that down in this episode. But before we do have a quick message from our sponsor, NordVPN. And while it's no secret the Toronto Blue Jays have elite defense this season, it is important that you have elite defense against the harmful threats on the internet, and that can be done using NordVPN. And visit nordvpn.com/Jays to access internet privacy with a single click, even when you're not home. Using public Wi-Fi networks at shopping malls or airports can be very risky, but with NordVPN, your personal data is encrypted, providing a super simple and super easy way to protect yourself from the internet. And one of the best features as well is that sometimes you want to be able to watch TVs and movies that aren't available in your country. I know I've done that tons of times. And if you want to do that, NordVPN can spoof your location and you can watch different content from different countries very, very easily. And that's the best part about it. There's multiple use cases for NordVPN. And also another use case with NordVPN's special threat protection and dark web monitor, you get an extra layer of protection for good measures from unwanted malware on your device. So you'll be notified if your info ends up on the dark web. And the best part about all of this is that you can use our code nordvpn.com/Jays and get exclusive offers. That is nordvpn.com/Jays. So head over there and check them out to access your exclusive offer that includes 4 months free, along with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to you. So thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video, and let's get you back to the content. Thank you again to NordVPN for sponsoring this one. Check them out in the pinned comment or the description as well. Now, we have a lot to dive into today, and Peter's thoughts will also be in here. We have a clip from him speaking out on all of this because there's a lot to break down and a lot to discuss today because, again, in a very surprising turn of events, Mark Shapiro came out. Let's start by his initial comment, which was, in the 9 seasons I've been through, this is the biggest disconnect between expectations and the biggest disappointment. We need to learn, and we need to get better from that. And that's an understatement. This has been one of the most disastrous seasons in recent memory for the Toronto Blue Jays. You rewind back to 2021, team was looking great. You had a young core. You had the best offense in baseball. You had tons of things to look forward to. You're thinking, okay, maybe we can make a push for the World Series in 2022 after missing the playoffs by 1 game on that final game 162 back in 2021. And ever since then, the offense has been declining. They obviously made the changes to focus more on defense, like I just discussed in the NordVPN video. But now they're at the point where they've really hit an all-time low. Vladdy's a pending UFA after next year. Same with Bichette. And you have all these players, and the expectations this year were, okay, the Jays need to make at least the ALCS for it to be not a disappointment after not even winning a playoff game under this core. And they have just completely disappointed every single person, every single Jays fan. I'm sure they disappointed themselves, specifically Ross Atkins as well. And speaking of Ross Atkins, he did and was asked about him and said this: I'm very rarely and unequivocal about anything. Commenting on job status during the season is not something I've done or will do. That being said, contextually, I'm a big believer in continuity and stability and think those are competitive advantages. And Shapiro goes back to the deadlines we'll get into in a second, but basically starts off by saying they're starting to get out of their quote-unquote crisis here and reiterates that getting below the CBT line was a secondary factor because of the baseball benefits. Primary focus was in infusing talent into the organization, which at least we can give them credit for. They did do that at this deadline. They infused a lot of young talent. At the time of recording, Jonathan Clase just hit his first home run for the Toronto Blue Jays AAA squad, the Buffalo Bison. So there is a lot of positives going on right now for the Jays. Another great win yesterday, but you can see the first thing here. He says he's not very, he doesn't usually comment on guys like Ross Atkins' status right now, but if you read between the lines, it seems like Ross Atkins' job is safe right now. And he also was asked about, position players, about how they've really evaluated some of their players. And he said, we've done a good job developing position players. Where we've fallen short is identifying and developing pitching. Shapiro says evaluating amateur performance has to be contextual. And he goes on, Ben Nicholson-Smith, that's exactly what Ben Nicholson-Smith says all the time. On competing in 2025, the decision we made there are representative of that. We believe there's enough talent in place to build a championship caliber team next year, but a lot of work to done, but the intent is clear. So there's a lot of things to go over here. For one, they haven't developed pitchers well at all. They obviously traded for a pitcher at the trade deadline. He's the number 3 prospect. He could potentially slide in and be one of those guys, but they failed to develop pitching along the way. Yeah, they developed a handful of position players that have been well. Even this season, you have Spencer Horwitz, even Ernie Clement to a degree, who wasn't a prospect, but developed pretty well under the Toronto Blue Jays system there in AAA for a little bit, even though he is 29 years of age, or might be 30 now. Happy birthday to him if he's 30. But you look at all of this, and they need to develop pitchers if they want to do anything. Obviously, Nate Pearson, they fell short. They traded him. Alek Manoah, to a degree, they developed him really well. One of the success stories, but ultimately he flared out for now. Could be good next year. Ricky Tiedemann failed to develop. Brandon Barriera, injured. Ricky Tiedemann also could still develop into a good pitcher, but he's injured at the moment. So many of these guys. Adam Macko, injured. I'm not saying injury is their fault, but it also isn't necessarily a problem it's a problem that a lot of teams are facing, but the Blue Jays system specifically, they keep injuring pitchers. Well, the pitchers keep getting injured. They're not physically injuring them, but there has to be some sort of correlation there. And when you're looking at their plan to compete in 2025, he makes a pitcher perfectly clear. They are fully planning on competing next year, which is good or bad depending on where you stand on the whole rebuild and things like that. But it makes it seem like they're going for it next year, and whether or not that's a great idea is up to you. But they're confident in competing in 2025 because they have a good enough core to do that. They don't expect to scale back their large payroll, which means they could pursue a big free agent. We'll break that down in a future video. And then on Vlad and Bo, I'm not going to comment on those guys specifically, but it's certainly easier to build a championship caliber team with talent like that in place. On a fan turnout question, it's important to get better and win. And we do have a couple more screenshots here to show you for these quotes. A lot of stuff came out today, but I do want to throw it to Peter real quick. His audio is going to start playing. He had his thoughts on these underwhelming comments by Mark Shapiro, sorry.
Judging by these comments from Mark Shapiro, it doesn't seem as though anything is going to change, at least front office-wise, heading into next season, and I think that's a huge mistake. First of all, Shapiro and Atkins have done a terrible job in making sure that this team performs up to their standard, and I understand what he's saying in terms of not getting the production that he was expecting out of some players, and that this was one of the more colossal, disappointing seasons that he's seen, and in terms of projection, but man, this has just been a whirlwind for the Blue Jays. Nothing has gone to plan injury-wise, bullpen-wise, rotation-wise, and lineup-wise as well, but it's hard to be shocked when you make minimal changes after such a terrible offensive season that you had last year and expect things to change. So that's where I'm at with this thing. Yeah, it's on the players for not performing up to their expectations, but at the same time, you didn't make any critical changes in the offseason. You brought in Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, you brought in Justin Turner, and you failed to address the biggest need that your team had this offseason, and that was the lineup and the lack of power that was in there. So yeah, Bichette being one of the worst qualified hitters in baseball doesn't help that situation, but you bring in a 39-year-old DH, you bring in a utility player that has never had an OPS over 720 and expect them to fix your problems, and you bring back Kevin Kiermaier as well. So I just look at all those factors, and yeah, the players failed to meet expectations, but so did the front office. And for that reason, I think him, Mark Shapiro, and Ross Atkins should be gone heading into next season, but I doubt that will change. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. He's right. But at the same time, this has been 9 years of failure for him and Atkins, and there haven't been any repercussions because they're making money for the team, and that's the bottom line. That's the most important thing to those two guys and to the organization as well.
Yeah, I mean, what do you have to say? Like, obviously, most of this falls on Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins collectively, and for him to come out and not really make any major, it seems like nothing is going to change. Now, yes, he did say some good things. Obviously, they did some great things over the past few months, specifically at the deadline, but the biggest thing here is that he didn't make any major changes. He also spoke out on John Schneider a little bit, saying that for now he's going to leave those comments to Ross Atkins, but it seems like his job is secure. So it seems like no management changes are going to happen, at least this season. I think that they're going to give Ross Atkins one last shot, one last hurrah in 2025 to see if they can compete. And if they fall short again, then they'll probably move on from them. But just to collectively summarize this by Brandon Weil here, Shapiro did not explicitly say that Atkins' job is safe, but it does sound like that, as he says, quote, reacting and change doesn't necessarily mean improvement. Stability and continuity is where I'm focused right now. The focus on my conversations with Ross is what we can learn about how we can put the team together rather than, of course, firing anybody. And obviously they did get under the CBT, which is something they were focused on. It's something that we were still wondering given the amount of numbers and the amount of money that they gave out at the deadline. They ultimately got under the CBT, and they're going to keep Ross Atkins. Even though they're under the CBT, they're going to keep Ross Atkins for 2025 and maybe fire him if he fails to do that. But let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. A lot of comments to go over. Got it out as soon as I could for you guys. And again, thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this one.